for me, the biggest piece of the equation is that, we want people to have fun while they're here. I very, very passionately believe that people learn better when they're having fun. They listen better. They hear our conservation stories. They hear about what they can do to help protect the environment. They learn about the quality of the care we provide our animals. All of those important messages they hear better when they're having fun.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Josh, I am fantastic. How are you?
Faded out there a little bit, but came back in. I was worried.
I think they call it Doppler effect.
I think so too. I think you've done that in the past as well.
It may have.
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. Question for you.
Yeah.
You have done a lot of work with zoos and aquariums over the last 10, 12 years-ish or so, right?
Yes.
You've also visited many of them as a guest, haven't you?
Correct.
And one of the cool things of going to a zoo or an aquarium is being able to see the animals up close and be able to observe them in their habitat at the zoo or aquarium. Do you think you have a perception from being there on the side of the guest, of looking at the animals, of knowing how happy they are?
I don't know that I'm qualified to say they're happy. I think I can tell when, and maybe I would call this happy, but I can tell when they're engaged, right? Okay. I can tell when, and maybe this is the wrong way to say it, but I can tell when I think nothing's wrong.
Okay.
Maybe, right? Because like our guest today says, I can tell when my dog is happy, right? He's wagging his tail. I spend a lot of time with my dog, so I know what the signs are. I know how to read that. I'll give you a quick example. At Georgia Aquarium, I spent probably an inordinate amount of time watching the beluga whales.
Fair.
But they were fascinating. And they were swimming and they were playing, and maybe playing is a sign of happiness, right? If they're engaging with enrichment, if they're engaging with other animals, if they're engaging with the guests in some very safe way. But I think when you can see them do their natural thing, to me, that's what might indicate an animal is happy, or it's satisfied, or it's content. Again, I'm not an animal behaviorist, so it's hard to say. But I think I can tell when nothing is wrong, if that makes sense.
Okay. I appreciate the way you answered that question, because particularly you said, I'm not qualified to say if they are happy or not. You said, I'm not an animal behaviorist, meaning that if you're not, the majority of the guests who are visiting zoos and aquariums aren't either. They're out for a day out with their family, with their friends, whatever it is. And their perception of if the animal is happy is really all they have to go with. So like you said, I can tell when they're engaged, when they're playful, whatever it is. I think the fascinating thing about that is the way that perception then translates into how the guest perceives the overall operation, the overall standard of animal care at that facility. And you can see that if you pull up TripAdvisor, if you pull up any review site, guests will share with you what they believe to be is objective fact that is based off of their perceptions. I remember many years ago, I was doing some consulting work for a zoo, and I said, you've got a lot of negative reviews that say that the baboons are very unhealthy and they've got spots on them, they got bumps, and the head of the zoo said, that's how baboons are. That's just naturally part of it. They're not the most attractive creatures that there are, aesthetically at least, but it has nothing to do with their actual health. So there's this interesting challenge that zoos and aquariums have of communicating the healthiness and happiness of their animals to guests without overwhelming them with all of the knowledge that they do have from animal care, from veterinary medicine. And that ties in nicely with the conversation that we have today with Dr. Mike Adkesson. He is the CEO of the Brookfield Zoo just outside of Chicago, Illinois, and he is a vet by trade. He spent many years working in veterinary medicine before about a year and a half taking on the CEO role at the Brookfield Zoo. And it's so interesting to hear from his lens as far as animal care and conservation and how guests perceive that as well, and communicating that message in a way that resonates with someone who is not an animal behaviorist or is not qualified to tell this animal is happy and or healthy based on my observation.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting you talked about the baboon or any animal, right, that we might see in another context. And for some reason, when you were saying that, I'm thinking cartoons, right? Mm-hmm. We see a lot of animals in cartoons, maybe me being the age I am, maybe I saw more, when I was younger, whatever the case may be.
I watched Bugs Bunny when I was a kid.
There you go. So is that what you think a real bunny looks like? Bugs Bunny, right? Or a roadrunner. I've seen a real roadrunner, right? It doesn't look like the one in the cartoon. And so whatever our perception or our experience is before that, even if we know in our minds that, okay, I saw the baboon cartoon, but now I'm seeing a real one, but it looks different. So if my original perception of that baboon is that that cartoon is healthy, then what I'm seeing in that real baboon might not be, right? So it's really interesting, like when you were saying that, like where our perceptions can come from, but that's also what Dr. Mike talks about, because so much of what we bring into the experience is part of the experience. And when you are experiencing the zoo from a guest perspective, and you're seeing the animals and you're learning about the animals, one of the things that he says is that it's so much easier to learn about the animals and their environment when you're having fun. So that's one of the things that he really focuses on. And he says, nobody wants to come into the zoo and have a bad time. So let's not create a bad time. Let's create a good time, a fun time, so that people can take away those educational nuggets with them.
Yeah. And if they're having a bad time and you're trying to shove all this information in their face that they have to take with it, it's not going to resonate. So give them a great time, let them have fun. And then, like you just said, based on what Dr. Mike said, is that people learn best when they are having fun. Yeah. So he also talks about the conservation efforts beyond the gates of the zoo as well, and that they work with Humboldt penguins, and they have some of those at the zoo, and you can interact with them and learn about them as well as many endangered species. He talks about wolf pups and kind of a fun conversation about animals, and because it's fun, we learn a lot too.
And we were happy during this conversation, right? I saw a smile on your face. I know I had a smile on my face. That's how we can tell as human beings we're happy. And Dr. Mike talks a lot about how the animals, based on their scientific data and process, they know the animals are healthy. They know they have a good mental state. They know that they're happy. And it's his contention that we should be talking more about that, how well cared for the animals are, because that's the perception. If you see an animal doing something that you don't think they should be doing, like one of the big cats, you've heard this before, my favorite, the lions, the tigers, they lay around a lot, but that's what they do, right? So to say that, that the lion is not feeling well because he's taking some shade, that's what he would be doing out on the savannah in Africa. So that's not a good criteria for us to be judging whether or not that animal is healthy or happy. But Dr. Mike's team, they know.
So should we have fun and learn a little bit with this conversation with Dr. Mike?
Yes, we should.
Hey, Dr. Mike, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to chat with you today. How are you?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. So to get this kicked off, can you tell us a little bit about your background and tell us about your career?
Sure. So I'm a veterinarian by background and training. Went on to specialize in zoo and wildlife medicine, and worked here at Brookfield Zoo for 15 years in a clinical veterinarian role, and later on as a leadership position over our animal health care, veterinary services department, and overseeing all of the animal health operations here at the zoo. Moved into this current position as president and CEO about 18 months ago. So really settled into this new position and very excited about the future directions here at the zoo.
Well, we definitely want to dive into all of that, but I'm curious too, what originally got you into veterinary medicine?
So I actually got into zoos before I got into veterinary medicine. So my mom signed me up for a youth volunteer program at the local zoo in my hometown. I'm from Decatur, Illinois. So a small zoo called Scoville Zoo. Summer volunteer program for kids. Started in that about 8 years of age. Not completely sure if my mom signed me up for it because I expressed interest or she was just trying to get me out of the house a couple afternoons a week. But either way, it stuck, and ended up continuing to volunteer through that program until I aged out of it. Got my first job as a part-time zookeeper at 15, and really kind of never looked back. So veterinary medicine was really the path to stay in a zoo-focused career, and yeah, the rest is kind of history on that front.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the shift or the transition from veterinary medicine to executive leadership?
Yeah, it's kind of back to that piece of, I wanted to work at a zoo before I wanted to be a veterinarian. I've always loved everything about zoos. So to me, I have always been excited about everything that zoos represent, from conservation, education, research, training, and then the fun and the guest-oriented components to the just creation of a wonderful family experience on a Saturday afternoon. So the whole package has always been something that I've always been excited about. Loved being a veterinarian, still love being a veterinarian. I shouldn't say it in a past tense, I guess, but I loved everything about my job as a clinical veterinarian, but definitely also really enjoyed the leadership aspects of my job. So I ended up going back and doing an MBA a few years ago, with an eye towards future leadership opportunity, and really became incredibly fortunate that the timing and the stars kind of aligned in terms of my predecessor retiring and the opportunity becoming available to step into a leadership position here at a zoo that I've been part of for a long time, and holds a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, to have kind of had that previous zoo and early zoo experience, I'm curious, what are you taking away now from that early experience that you can say, this is still part of who I am and my DNA, and I'm using this to kind of catapult my leadership, knowing that happened many years ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just always remembering, for me, how much I loved being there as a kid, and everything about that experience, I think, informs some of the decision making I make today. And that's the combination of finding the right balance between the zoo being a fun destination and someplace that you go to enjoy with friends and family, but making sure that we're always doing that in a way that is mindful of what's in the best interest of our animals, making sure that we're providing them the absolute best care possible, maintaining their well-being and their physical and medical health, as well as making sure that there's a mission kind of baked into all of that, there's a reason for the animals to be here. And sometimes that is because they're part of a conservation program that is aiming to get animals back into the wild. Sometimes it's because they're part of a conservation program telling a story about the challenges that wildlife face around the world, and sometimes they're here just to help make that connection of between people and animals. In a very urbanized environment, there are a lot of kids that grow up without setting foot on a farm, and we may be the only place they come into contact with a goat, and there's something important in that just in itself, that it's an opportunity for kids to really develop a sense of empathy for animals and to really be able to connect with them and understand the importance of animals in our society.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you took on the CEO role about 18 months ago, and that would bring us to around October of 2021.
Yeah.
And we all know what was going on in the world at that point, and had been for over a year and a half at that point as well. I would love to know what that was like for you, because it's such a challenging time for everybody. And then in the state of Illinois was more lockdown, I'd say more procedures than perhaps some other states. So as far as kind of moving into the CEO role during that time, would love to know what that was like and any challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a tough time, and in some ways continues to be a tough time. By and large, the zoo did okay during COVID, as an outside destination. Even in the tougher parts of a social lockdown situation, we were still able to provide a decreased capacity visit rate for our operations, and people were able to stay socially distanced while here on grounds outside. We kept a lot of the buildings closed, but we still had a good number of people coming through our gates. Now we had to make some really tough decisions to scale back programs, reduce staffing, undertake a number of cuts to just maintain financial viability. I kind of came into the leadership position right in the middle of that. So, my challenge was as much finding a way back out of it as it was continuing to operate in that environment. But that was really tough, and it continues to be tough because, the visitation rates are not what they used to be. People are still, in many cases, sort of carrying along some behavioral remnants of the pandemic. We've got within our society, I think we've got a backlog of people that, had weddings canceled or vacations postponed. And so, there's a lot of other things people are trying to do right now that is making it difficult for us to really kind of predict what some of those visitation rates, look like on a move forward basis. So that was one challenge. Another challenge is it's really tough to get to know teams when you can't sit down together. And so what I kind of jokingly kept referring to as this would normally be a sit down with a work group over some coffee and donuts in the morning, and just let them hear a little bit about my leadership style and my future vision for the zoo, and listen to their concerns and listen to their challenges. We ended up doing that on Zoom, or we ended up doing that sitting around a table with no coffee and donuts, so there was that challenge of just becoming familiar with aspects of the operation that, were not quite as close to me in previous years. And then the other kind of dynamic on all of it is, as a zoo with animals, we also not only had staff safety considerations, we had animal safety considerations. And, it's an aspect of the pandemic that didn't get a lot of attention, because by and large, our domestic animals were not susceptible to the coronavirus, but a number of other species of mammals were. So, at one point during the pandemic, we had a series of cases come to light in some of our larger cats and some of our small mammals, with some animals that were really sick from it and actively shedding virus, which creates a situation where we have staff that are still needing to care for those animals. So just a lot of complexity in that aspect that added challenge to kind of how we operated throughout that period of time.
Dr. Mike, you mentioned some of those tough choices and obviously the financial feasibility. And I think about comparing a zoo to, for example, an amusement park where, the rides don't need the upkeep when the park isn't open, right? But animals do, and animals are expensive. So I'm curious if we can dive a little deeper into that thought process and kind of what those conversations were like when you really had to I mean, a very delicate balance, right? To keep the high level of care for the animals, but also the feasibility for the organization.
Yeah, that was definitely the challenge, is that, even when we're closed, very different than an amusement park, that when it closes, the rides are closed and, there's some maintenance cost maybe, but by and large, they don't cost a whole lot to sit empty. Whereas for us, during the period of time that we were completely closed, and then during the periods where we were on a reduced visitation level, our animal care operation really doesn't change at all. So, the cost of that daily care, the cost of feeding the animals, it's a significant operational cost for us. And, we were fortunate in that we got a wonderful philanthropic base that supports the zoo, believes in our mission, and understood that dynamic, that our costs largely didn't change because we were closed and the animals still needed care. So we put together an above and beyond campaign very quickly to go after the funding to provide that ongoing care for our animals while our gates were closed. So that helped a lot. We still had to make some tough choices as far as scaling back on education and community programming, pausing activities around conservation, pausing activities around animal welfare research, and some of our other programs that we're very committed to and we're very passionate about because they help to advance our mission. But in that sort of operational environment, the funding was just not there.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love to switch gears just a little bit here. In the Brookfield Zoo, it's widely known as being one of the leading zoos in the country, and even just in Chicago, one of the top attractions. And you talked about being passionate about the zoo experience, and you mentioned fun a couple of times, and the family's day out on the Saturday, and blending that with the passion for the animals and the conservation. And would love to hear, really, I would say, the intersection of those, and delivering an experience that really balances that education, but also that superior visitor experience as well.
For me, the biggest piece of the equation is that we want people to have fun while they're here. I very, very passionately believe that people learn better when they're having fun. They listen better. They hear our conservation stories. They hear about what they can do to help protect the environment. They learn about the quality of the care we provide our animals. All of those important messages they hear better when they're having fun. So nobody wants to go out, have a crummy day with the family, and then also be, have a message shoved in front of you. So to me, that's what I always come back to with our teams is, this is all about the experience that our guests have from the moment they arrive at the zoo until, after they leave. And we always want to stay focused on making that experience as positive as possible. So that takes on a lot of different forms in everything from, the quality of the food they're grabbing at a snack stand while they're here, to the additional attractions that we offer. But most importantly, it's the animal experience. And so, making sure that in the context of providing the best care we can for our animals, how are we also making sure that our animals are visible to our guests so that they're able to see them, they're able to get that special up close, look into a habitat. They're able to potentially interact with an animal care staff member while they're here and learn about what it takes to care for the animals, learn the animals' names, learn a fun fact about them. That type of just personalized experience is a huge part of what we do. And we also have the luxury that every experience here can be different. It's not the same ride every time you come. It's a different experience every time. And you may see an animal doing something very different, on one visit that can be that engaging experience. If we've got a newly born animal, or we've got a pair of animals that are, just meeting one another, or we've got a young animal that's just come in that's active and, excited in a different way. So, really making sure that we're trying to provide that sort of variable experience in a very effective way that keeps people engaged and keeps them wanting to come back.
And I love the way that you talk about how people will learn and be more engaged when they are having fun. So I'm curious from a leadership perspective, how do you translate that also to the teams there at Brookfield Zoo, right? Because they're delivering this information. They're the ones caring for the. Talk to me a little bit about the environment that's created for the team as well.
Sure. For our animal care staff, they're the frontline people that take care of the animals. And, we kind of always, joke a little bit that they've always got the best stories. They've got the best stories to tell because they're the ones that work there with the animals, but they're not the only ones that can tell those stories. And I think that's what's so neat about it is, we want them to share those stories, but then, any of our staff is able to pick up those stories. And, did you know that, Joe the giraffe loves apples, or, whatever the little tidbit may be. It's just as exciting to our guests, when they hear it from anybody along the way. It's kind of that personalized experience, so to speak, as they move through the zoo. It's a big team. That's the atmosphere that we try and are trying to build, is that all of our staff is on one team and we're all on that team together, and we all want to create a fantastic guest experience, and we want our animals to be happy and well cared for, and that's the core of our mission.
So are there any stories that you love to share that exemplify, whether it's that great way that the employees are sharing the stories, the guest experience, great facts about the animals that helps to, I would say, rev up the excitement and also tie back to the mission as well?
Yeah. I often try and look at the zoo through my kids' eyes. So I've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-month-old daughter. But those older two, obviously, have kind of grown up at the zoo, so to speak, with me. So, they are very, very familiar with so many aspects of our operations, and often, can talk to me about our animals using the animal's first name, and so it's kind of those same stories back to me, but they also get so excited about other aspects of the operation. I would joke that, I end up here with my kids and they're more excited about, the slushy, or they're more excited about, a golf cart ride from, my office across the zoo or something. And so, they're a little bit skewed in what they think is normal because they've been around the animals all along. But, the stories that I can share with them are the same types of stories that I try and share with other people, I guess. And, those are often just little tidbits about, what an animal likes to eat, or, what an animal's, what I saw them doing the other day. They were playing around with a item of enrichment, or playing around with a toy, or, did something silly. And so those are just those little moment by moment tidbits, I think, that resonate so well with our guests. A lot of my, more entertaining stories are probably from the medical side, where, as a veterinarian, like I would, have the opportunity to interact with a lot of animals in a very different way. And, a lot of those are animals that, we become very close to because we spend a lot of time caring for them in a very close way. And so some of those experiences are fantastic. We've got a sloth in our ambassador program, so our animal ambassador program, that gets animals out into the park and allows people to see them up close and talk with an animal care staff member about them. So we've got an ambassador animal named Timo that's a two-toed sloth. And, Timo actually spent some time when he was young in the hospital as we were, trying to get him just stabilized, had a little bit of a struggle early in life, and just needed some tender loving care. And so that's an animal that, I spent a lot of time up close with, and he's a fantastic animal. He loves to eat green beans, and just those kind of little tidbits are, I think, sometimes the best stories we can tell.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the guest experience, just for a minute, as someone who goes to a zoo, because I think when I go to a zoo, my mindset is to try to absorb as much as possible, right? And I want to take it all in, and I want to, when I leave, have all this information, all this knowledge in my head, but I also know that's probably not realistic, right? Because I'm there to also have fun. I'm there, I want to stare at the big cats for a long time. But I want to, absorb all that. But I know even if now that I've been to many zoos over the years, if I just walk out with a couple of tidbits and then that accumulates over time, that's fine, right? So
Yeah.
is that sort of how that process is designed, like for people to come back and get those different experiences every time, so that then it kind of builds on itself?
Yeah, that's certainly what I hope people do. Like you said, it's too much information to take it all in at once. And our hope is that we engage people, they become repeat visitors, they become members, they become supporters, and that we're able to just continually bring them along with us on the journey of what we do. And that can be well beyond the actual visit. That can be engagement on our social media channels. That can be browsing our website and looking at, some of the information that's on there as far as our conservation programs. We offer evening lectures. We offer lunchtime seminars that, dive deep into particular topics that we don't have the luxury of being able to share in that detail with our guests while they're here. But we strive to make that information available in other ways so that people do get to see that other side of what we do. We've got incredible conservation programs that work around the world, protecting wildlife and wild places. And, those programs are instrumental in conservation success for many species. And we partner with zoos and other conservation organizations around the world. So when you think about the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and it's over 250 member facilities, over the last 5 years, those zoos and aquariums have put $1 billion towards conservation programs aimed at protecting many of our world's most endangered species and threatened habitats. So, there's a depth to what we do there that is hard to convey in one visit. But we hope that we can bring people along with us as we, develop those programs and share those stories.
So I'm curious, actually, my question is about, how you are able to share those stories of the work that the zoo does beyond the gates of the zoo. Because the guest comes and guest experience, they want to have fun. They want to, they want to spend time with their family. They want to learn a little bit, but part of it is also sharing with them, hey, that the dollar that you're spending to get in here is not confined to just what we're doing at the zoo. Obviously, a lot of it has to be, and there's so much that goes on the site, but being able to really stress to the guest of, this is what's happening here, and it's so important because of all these things happening all these other places and all over the world.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it comes through, just the opportunities like this to share our story and share a deeper look into what we do. So we definitely try and take advantage of that. We also, I think we're able to use our animals in a way that, connects a person into a story about a particular species. And so they care more about a particular species because they've seen a specific animal up close while they're here at the zoo. So, our Mexican gray wolves are a great example of that, where we're partnered with other zoos around the country, as well as the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, on reintroduction programs for Mexican gray wolves in the Southwest United States. And it's a very successful conservation program that's trying to bring back that population from the edge of extinction. And we have wolf pups that are born here at the zoo, and on multiple occasions, those pups have actually been reintroduced back into the wild in a den site with a wild mom. So, if you do it at the right age and know what you're doing, you're able to actually get animals introduced back into the wild at a very young age, and then that mother wolf raises them in the wild and they're part of a pack, and you've now added to the success of that conservation program. So, we're hopefully able to take a story of wolf pups being born here at the zoo, and then, sort of captivate an audience on our animals here, and then, share that story with them about all the work going on in the wild to try and recover this population of wolves.
And can you talk a little bit about why that's so important? Why the conservation efforts are so important? I think we probably get it from a big picture standpoint, but when you're talking about getting that wolf pup into the pack and all the other things that you're doing, it's not just about the wolves, but thinking about all the different species that you're working with and other zoos are working with. Why is getting those animals back out into the wild and fulfilling those populations so important?
Yeah. We're living in the midst of one of the greatest extinction events on our planet right now, and are losing animals at an alarming rate right now. And it's entirely human driven right now. Is the reality of the situation, is that we are living in a day and age where as a species we have dominated the planet in a way that no other species ever has. And without that intervention, we're going to continue to see loss of species, loss of biodiversity, loss of habitat. And so it's incredibly important for us to be a voice in helping people to see that. I think that it's hard to sort of abstractly process what that means when we talk about extinction rates and we talk about loss of biodiversity. Those are big problems. Those are big picture issues that are hard for people to kind of connect to. And, they may, on some level, recycle because they know it's the good thing to do for the planet, or they'll turn off light switches to conserve energy because they know it's the right thing to do for the planet. But it's hard to kind of connect those two pieces together without somebody really being able to kind of steward you through that process and share that story. So, we work with a Humboldt penguin conservation program in Peru. And so we have Humboldt penguins at the zoo. We have a penguin encounter that lets people get a chance to come meet some of our penguins, but in a smaller group setting. So, 20 people in a room with an animal care staff member and a couple penguins. It's a hugely popular program. Penguins are very inquisitive and kind of naturally curious birds. So it's a really great opportunity for people to visit an animal and really connect with that animal on a one-on-one basis. And then we tell that story about conservation of penguins in Peru. And it's now, it's a very different level of connection of, I'm going to recycle this, or I'm going to make sure this waste gets to the right place because I don't want this piece of plastic to eventually end up in the wild where a penguin is going to get hold of it and it's, potentially going to impact the life of that bird. Because I have met Pepe the penguin at Brookfield Zoo, and I adore Pepe the penguin. And so, being able to make those connections in that very close way, I think helps people to have an anchor for that of, okay, I understand the importance of ocean conservation because I know that if we don't do our part to make sure our oceans stay healthy, there's not going to be any Humboldt penguins left in the wild.
I think this kind of transitions nicely into another question we wanted to ask you about. And that was just, just over the last decade, or last many years, but particularly I would say accelerated in the last decade, the public perception of animals in professional care just continues to change. And curious about responding to that, and not just at the organizational level, but would love to hear as far as from you personally, just with your background, particularly in veterinary medicine, of just your response to the shifting public perception of animals in zoos and aquariums.
Yeah. It's a complex conversation for sure, and it's a very important one, and it's one that I always try and engage any chance that I can. There is a story there that I think zoos and aquariums have not told well over the last few decades. We have a history as zoos and aquariums have a history, all the way back to our founding of taking animals out of the wild for largely, human purposes in terms of entertainment. And when one died, we would go get another one. And I think that is a history that we have to own. It is certainly not something I think that any zoo would be proud of today. And it's something that I think has dramatically changed over the last 30 years and has not been shared effectively with the public. The reality is nearly all animals in zoos today are born in zoos or are part of a conservation program. The emphasis that we place on the health and well-being of our individual animals is mission critical and the core of what we do as a segment right now in terms of zoos and aquariums. We are hugely focused on animal care and animal welfare. And the reality of the situation is that, from a medical and health standpoint, our animals receive better care than most pets, and they receive better care than really billions of people around the globe receive. Our animal hospital here at the zoo is an incredibly advanced hospital when you compare it to the level of medical care that many people on this planet live with. So, it is a core part of what we do today is making sure that our animals are healthy, both mentally and physically. We go to great lengths to make sure that we're providing them enriching and stimulating environments where they're happy. And as a zoo, I think we shy away from that word a little too much. We're hesitant to say our animals are happy, and instead we tell a story with the science and the data behind it, which the data is there to support that. But I think people need to hear from us more that, yes, our animals are happy. It is okay to be at a zoo. It is okay to be comfortable that our animals are well cared for, because they are. They're happy, they're healthy. And they're thriving, and they play an integral part in education and conservation and programs globally right now. We get a lot of challenge from animal rights organizations, and I think the point that is often lost in that conversation is that for many of these animal rights organizations, their goal is to, not have animals under human care, and whether that's in a zoo or whether that's in a livestock setting or whether that's a pet in your household, there's a fundamental focus by many of these organizations that they just don't feel that's, animals should be at the quote unquote service of humans. But the other point that's lost in that is those organizations are by and large not supporting conservation of wildlife, and that's sort of where that chasm becomes really kind of clear to me, is that, if we're not doing it, there's nobody doing it in terms of being able to make those connections to wildlife and help people see these animals in a way that inspires them to care and makes a connection for them to want to help these animals in the wild.
Mike, I'm curious, as you talk about actually sharing that, hey, our animals are happy, right? Is part of the reluctance to even use that type of word that if they're not happy, then they must be sad. And if they're sad, they're not being well taken care of. So you don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to, it's a difficult conversation, because it's easy to point and say that animal is unhappy. And then, it puts you in a position of having to try and argue back that the animal is happy. And the way that you sort of prove that the animal is happy is through different metrics and measures of animal welfare, looking at behavioral patterns, looking at health parameters. And we can do all of that for most of the species in our care, as we have very well established indicators of health. We have very good tools for monitoring welfare. We can look at behavioral diversity and what an animal is doing. We can look at, longevity data, that these animals are surviving, better and longer under human care than they are in the wild. But the way in which we make all of those arguments is from an objective, scientific, data-driven point. And so that's the information that we try and share back. But it often just kind of gets lost in the message. Is, somebody points and says that animal's unhappy, and then we respond with a very objective, scientifically driven statement, and it kind of gets lost in translation, where I think for a lot of people, they just want us to say, nope, they're happy. And they're willing to kind of go along with us on that we have the experts, we have the animal care staff, we have the researchers, we have the welfare specialists that can say, yep, they're happy. And I think that's just a message we need to be a little more comfortable saying. I know my dog is happy when I come home at the end of the day and I walk in my house. Like, my dog is happy, it's wagging its tail, and it's very eager to see me. And I don't necessarily need to scientifically prove that. Like, we can interpret it because we know that animal so well. And it's in most cases that same sort of connection that our animal care staff and our animals have. They have incredible bonds. When we talk about something like when we talk about dolphins under human care, dolphins are an animal that definitely attract that sort of conversation of, are they thriving under human care? And, I can go over there and I can look at one of our dolphins interacting and engaging with one of our animal care staff. And it's the same type of bond that you see people have with their pet dog or their pet cat. And, those animals are in an incredibly good state of care, and then they enjoy spending time with the people that provide that care for them. And so those relationships are phenomenal. And I think in many cases, when people see that up close and firsthand, they don't have those lingering questions anymore. And it's I think something that as a profession we need to do a better job of helping people to kind of see that behind the scenes view of our animals and understand the level of compassion and care that our animal care staff has for the animals that they work with every day.
It is such a fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could. I feel like there could be so much to unpack. We could do a whole another probably series of podcasts just on that topic. But in the meantime, we'd love to learn a little bit about the zoo's master plan for the centennial anniversary, which is still 11 years away. Would love to know as far as kind of what the process for that is like of looking out towards 2034.
Yeah, absolutely. So that 11 years sounds like a long time until you really start looking at how that breaks down into major capital projects and timelines. So right now we are in the process of developing that master plan vision that will lead us past that centennial celebration of the zoo opening. So we are really looking at this to be a master plan that will set the vision for the next 100 years, a series of major capital investments in the zoo to provide new experiences for our guests, to enhance and expand our animal habitats and the buildings that serve those different experiences, and really just to continue to improve that guest experience as well, so that, when we talk about people coming here and having fun, we're providing new and exciting reasons for them to come as we continue to try and build our visitation even higher than what it is now. We have a leadoff project already identified and underway, so we're working towards new outdoor habitats for our gorillas, our orangutans, and a number of our different monkey species. So this will be a 2-acre animal habitat that will attach onto our current Tropic World facility, which is our indoor rainforest experience for all of our primates. And it will really provide a incredible enhancement in the spaces that those animals have to live in and interact with, just in terms of the environment that they're in. So we're tremendously excited about it. Tropic World was really sort of state of the art and revolutionary when it opened, but that was 40 years ago. And, a lot of things have changed in 40 years. And, we really today are very focused on providing a enhanced environment to those animals. We want to get them outside. We want them to be able to experience a more naturalistic environment. And so we think it's going to be a very compelling project to sort of lead off this new master plan. And we'll sort of be layering in a couple of additional major capital campaigns, to follow this one to get us up to that 2034 timeline.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Mike, you have given us such a great insight into your career and certainly the Brookfield Zoo. I'm curious if there were people that were thinking about, wanting to get into executive leadership for a zoo or an aquarium or any place that maybe has an animal collection, what would your advice be?
It's a great question. There's no one path, I think, is the best statement I can make to that. Is when you look at leadership throughout zoos at the CEO level or at the senior vice president levels, you'll find that there is no shortage of different backgrounds that people have come from. And I think that really is a tremendous asset to our profession as a whole, is that, there are a lot of different ways to get here, and all of the different leaders bring a different background that I think makes our collective voice even stronger. In that vein, I think that, anybody looking for that leadership pathway can really come at it from a lot of different ways. We look for the same skill sets in our marketing staff, our HR staff, our IT staff that, any other industry segment would look at. So, I would encourage somebody that is, maybe not from an animal background to consider, giving a zoo a try in terms of, career opportunities. For those coming up through the animal ranks, I think just really taking the time to become familiar with the other aspects of the operation of a major zoological park is, key to that. I feel very fortunate that I have such a strong animal background. But it's also the leadership investment that I've undertaken and the MBA and some of the other skill sets that have really helped me to get where I am today.
Excellent. Dr. Mike, this has been such a fascinating conversation. As we start to wind this down here, if people wanted to learn more about Brookfield Zoo, or if they wanted to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
So our website is probably the best place for information, brookfieldzoo.org or CZS, Chicago Zoological Society.org. Wealth of information on our website, lots of links to other resources and additional sources of information, and contact information there as well.
Excellent. Well, like Josh said, this has been a great conversation. Dr. Mike, thank you so much for your time. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.